1 week season, fam. La Familia, welcome back. It is week 10 of DFS Labs. This is the Fanduel edition, of course. I'm your host, Mike Johnson, mjohnson86. We are coming to you today. It is Wednesday afternoon, heading into week 10, just 24 hours removed from the NFL trade deadline, and it was an active one. We have the haves and the have-nots, some teams going for it, some teams, multiple teams going for it, just going for different things. Some going for the first overall pick and some going for the last overall pick of the 2026 draft. So we are coming off a very exciting week 9, a very successful week 9 for the 1 week season, fam. Of course, check us out if you are not already a subscriber, oneweekseason.com. We have our DFS and Inner Circle memberships. We have the Bink Machine, our optimizer with Sims as well. The Bink Machine, as well as our All Access Pass, and that includes our Bink Machine and Inner Circle membership, or just our Inner Circle membership, depending on if you're the optimizer bro or not. We have something for all of you, and they are all 30% off for rest of season at this point. That will take you all the way through the Super Bowl. We, of course, have our NFL Edge. We break down every game every week, and then we have the Scroll, which has all of our content specific to that week's slate. And a lot going on there. This week's slate is an interesting one, an 11-game slate. We have several key teams coming off bye. We have a couple of interesting cross-conference matchups, and we have some teams that kind of signaled with their actions what their intent is for the rest of the season. We do not get to target the Bengals and Cowboys defenses, unfortunately, which has been profitable throughout the season. So we're going to have to find some other angles rather than just click wherever it says @CIN. So with that said, Maximus, how are we doing today?
Howdy, sir. Yeah, we're coming off across all platforms with users, contributors at 1 week season. We had a great week 9 and looking forward to carrying that momentum into week 10 here.
Yeah. First things first, want to recap week 9. We will bring up, I want to share the, of course, in the description on YouTube, you'll find the link to our bottom-up build contest. Of course, that is each week we have a contest using not the full $60,000, but $54,500 salary cap. Forces us to look and evaluate salary, find the best values at the position, think through how we would win a contest with a smaller salary cap. Kind of helps us prioritize and make decisions and kind of really lock into what we like. Great training exercise, I think, and great way to kind of create, I guess, a foundation that you can create your rosters for the rest of the week from there. So we had 58 lineups this week. Shout out to RK Shakti, RK_Shakti, 151.9 points this week. The winning score had a Chicago Bears double stack with Caleb Williams, Kyle Monangai, and Colston Loveland. Was able to bring it back with Jamar Chase, which difficult in this format at his expensive salary, but only 5% owned. He, of course, it was T. Higgins this week that carried the torch, but we'll get to that in a second here. And then, Travion Henderson and Kareem Hunt, the value running backs. Also had Brian Thomas Jr., a little mini with Trey Tucker in that Vegas and Jacksonville game. Didn't quite hit the right two guys there. Obviously, Parker Washington and Brock Bowers went nutty. And then the Texans defense, which was an OWS favorite last week. So shout out to him. The link, like I said, to the week 10 bottom-up build contest is in the description. With that said, we'll go ahead and Maximus took down the, I'm going to share it now, the early only 5K Sunday Blitz. It's a $100 entry, 56-person contest. Winning score with 198.4 points. Really, I know it's small field, but you in the second place guy, you guys really ran away with this thing. Third place was 32 points behind you. So let you go ahead and talk about this lineup quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody who was early to the Colston Loveland coming out party put themselves in a position to do well. The main talking point with me, and it's funny, our other contributor, Tony, I ironically texted him about the Colston Loveland play in such a super small entry field. And you kind of have the point counterpoint. Is he too thin for a tournament like this? Or is it just a good way to build around an offense you feel confident about in a different way than everybody else is doing? And in this case, door number 2 worked for this team. Yeah, the other guy who was right, he was in first place, obviously, all the way until the late breaking play where Loveland got the touchdown on the Bengals there. So, but yeah, no, it was fun. Again, I thought it'd be kind of rare to have 2 pay up running backs on this build, and that's where Loveland, as far as ownership, as far as pricing, and as far as being attached to a good offense for this week, I think were all the factors that finally settled me in on playing him on this roster. And then, of course, I just figured, people would probably have McCaffrey or maybe one of the high-priced guys. It's amazing in hindsight how Jonathan Taylor, of all people, may have been the one that almost cratered the team. It's kind of crazy because he gets so much usage regardless of the matchup. But so be it. Thankfully, it didn't ruin me there. And of course, like you said, we were on the Texans defense at a good price. So yeah, and then of course T. Higgins. I know you and Xandermere had talked about them on the Slate show on Saturday. I've been thinking about him throughout the week. The pendulum swings in the NFL, guys. Even though Chase is getting the targets that he's getting, T. Higgins can be a wide receiver 1 basically on any other team, and it's only a matter of time as a deep threat until he gets involved with a Flacco, and thankfully that came to fruition at the right time on this team as well. And you're on mute, I think.
Whew, that was close. Yeah, and you also got the Chimere DK, the punt return touchdown. That's nice. Our boy DK.
Right.
Yeah, and there's a few things we talked about. On OWS last week, talked a lot about the quarterback running back pairings, playing quarterbacks and running backs together. We also talked about, I know Xandermere brought this up, and we both kind of were liking the idea this week of McCaffrey and Taylor together. Obviously, Taylor didn't work out in this instance, but just a couple of things there. Again, unique roster construction, I think, is the key there. I like the Colston Loveland play specific to this roster, especially. Obviously that big play at the end, but that's why he makes sense. I think in that sort of spot is he's a very talented player, right? He's a top 10 pick. So getting some access to him, and to your point there, to the thing you brought up with, do you need to play him? Do you not? The other thing with a contest like this is you can kind of take a little bit more risk because you can afford to have a couple of spots that don't hit perfectly. So you could kind of take that risk because, it's, if Loveland and Jonathan Taylor's scores had flipped there, nobody would blink, right? So, there's some good fortune with Loveland posting the good score, but also that's the worst possible run out you could have had for JT. But anyways, where I'm going with that is in the smaller field contests, you could take that take that little bit bigger swing and take on that little bit more risk. And you don't have to worry about if it flops, this is going to cost me first place. You could think of it from the upside of it could win me first place. Which it did in this particular instance. We'll also want to share, just for a quick aside, we'll get to the lineup really quick here, guys, but this is the $9, the early only contest, the 80K Sunday NFL Rush with 20 grand to first place. And you could see here, so Maximus's lineup had 198.4 points, which would have taken 20th place in that contest, which would have only been $100 return. So again, good to see, your contest selection and your, you spent a little more on your entry, but it was a really well-constructed lineup. And you made a little over $1,100 on it. Would have only made $90 in that $9 contest. So, and there's two ways to think about it, right? Like, if that's all you're there for is the bigger score, that, you're only going to be happy if you get those monster scores, then yeah, you just have to understand what you're kind of giving up, because you're not going to get paid off on these really good lineups. And, sometimes that lack of success can, or not winning a tournament, you don't build the confidence quite as quickly, or really realize how well you're playing. So shout out to you, Maximus, on a really well built roster and a strong showing in week 9. And let's get the people started in week 10, shall we?
Absolutely. Another interesting setup this week. Like you said, I think there's 11 games, 3 in the late window. My starting point this week, and I got some statistics to go along with it per our allies at Fantasy Points Data. One very interesting data point, actually, that I kind of ran across. But we're going to start with an offense that's been the model of consistency, amazingly, this year to this point. And dare I say, the receiver, probably even for as high a price as the main guy is probably a better degree of certainty than maybe even some of the pay-up running backs are this week. So we're going to start this build, and the other two pieces of this, very good Fanduel prices, in my opinion, as well as pricing overall continues to be tight. So we're going to start with Sam Darnold of the Seattle Seahawks, and we're going to go ahead and double stack him with Jackson Smith-Njigba and the newly acquired Rashid Shaheed at only $5,900. And then I actually do want to do a bring back here of Marvin Harrison Jr. at only $6,600, where it looks like Monday night, maybe the key was unlocked through Jacoby Brissett, dare I say, of all people, to finally get Marvin Harrison Jr. more involved in their offense. But Sam Darnold, very interesting statistic. This is per Fantasy Points. Sam Darnold has an 81.5% catchable throw rate on deep passes, which is 10% higher than any other player in the 5-year history of the data that Fantasy Points did on this metric. Also, Rashid Shaheed, very familiar with Clint Kubiak, who's the offensive coordinator with Seattle with his time as a Saint. So I think the assimilation into the offense could be a lot quicker than maybe it usually would for somebody that is newly acquired. And then the Arizona Cardinals, while they looked on defense pretty admirable against the Cowboys on Monday night, to this point during the year, they do rank 25th in a pass defense. So they're much better against the run. And of course, when it comes to the Seahawks, the backfield is maddening when it comes to Charbonnet and Walker. They kind of vulture each other. So I wanted to start this team with the passing attack of the Seahawks, bring it back with Marvin Harrison Jr. and 3 of those 4 players, pretty manageable prices on FanDuel. And you have JSN, which could be a week. And I think I came across JM mentioning this in his journal, where there could be more certainty at wide receiver spots like JSN than maybe some of the running back spots that the slate presents. And so, yeah, I wanted to start it there, and then I'll throw it back to you, what you think of that and where you may want to go from there. Yeah,
I think you're feeling confident after your big win, taking a swing here. I do think people overestimate the red 9th next to him, like opponent rank, especially with the colors. I think that red, first of all, that opponent rank, that's just in terms of fantasy points. And so obviously who you've played can have some impact on that as well. So I don't think the Cardinals are like a scary matchup by any means. But seeing that red 9 next to him, that can scare some people off. Shaheed, yeah, I don't think there will be too much. It will be too tough. He was very good under Clint Kubiak in the past, last year at the start of the season before he had his injury. I think he will assimilate pretty quickly. I'm guessing from his acquisition that Cooper Kupp, is not going to play at least this week again. He had that hamstring injury, suffered in practice last week, did not play. The Seahawks, their offense is just rolling. And Shaheed is not, I don't think he's going to come in and play full-time. They kind of rotate guys a bunch, but he's a big play merchant. That's what you're paying for here. Even once he's fully assimilated, they're a relatively low volume passing attack. And JSN is such a huge part of that volume. He's I don't even know offhand, but his share of the passing game is so big. It's wild. 4 straight games of at least 120 receiving yards and 8 receptions in each game. Pretty good there. And Shaheed, you're obviously banking on some big plays, which, they put on a show on Sunday night, and now they get the Cardinals on a short week. Marvin Harrison Jr., Jacoby Brissett has brought him to life and kind of made him a featured part of that. So I think that's pretty solid. I think with spending up for JSN and the state of the running back pool this week, with pricing being, like you said, a little bit tighter. Want to go to defense next. We'll just go ahead and throw in the Carolina Panthers. Obviously with Shaheed, we talked about the Saints making some trades, kind of throwing in the towel, I guess, on this season, signaling where they're at. But, you take him away from Tyler Shuck. The Panthers defense is playing very, very well right now. Obviously, they got shredded by the Bills, but, Josh Allen, James Cook, very different than Tyler Shuck and Alvin Kamara at this stage in his career. So I think the Panthers, they'll probably be a very popular defense, but I don't think that we have to really worry about that with this Seattle passing game stack as our core. I think we're plenty differentiated for the rest of it. So Panthers, good cheap option that we can go from. And then, at tight end, I want to throw George Kittle in. So he's been back for 2 games, played, or 3 games, I guess. The Falcons didn't have a catch at Houston, a very good defense, hit 4 for 43 and a touchdown. They played from behind there. And then at the Giants, had 4 for 32. Didn't really have to pass very much. I think there was only 24 pass attempts last week. But I do think a Kittle explosion is coming. And I think at 6,100 in that late hammer, highest total game of the week, kind of gives us some, I'm not trying to pay down. I think there's some good options at tight end this week. And, I think Kittle eventually he'll be back up to that 7K mark. So if we can get him in that high total game at this point, I think that's a good thing to do. What say you? And is there a specific running back you want to go to next?
Yeah, good shout on Kittle. I was thinking him too. I also had Carolina as my defense, a good cheap defense that is actually playing well. We just saw them go to Green Bay and pull out a victory there and really keep Jordan Love and that offense in check most of the game, which was quite surprising to me. So Carolina is no joke this year on defense most weeks. And then George Kittle, I think he's enough weeks separated now from recovering and coming back from the injury that I think he'll resume being a huge part of that offense. And he'll have to be against the Rams. That should be a competitive game where they're probably going to have to keep up with Stafford and company. So yeah, I like both those spots that you laid out there. For running backs, I have 2 names that would definitely fit in this build based on the salary that we have left over. I really like David Montgomery at 6,100 as the Lions play the hapless, my heritage team. But the Washington Commanders are just banged up inside and out. Unfortunately, probably a lost season for them. They lost Lattimore, I believe, for the year. I'd be surprised if Jaden comes back. And the Lions are coming off a loss at home to Minnesota. And we know with the mindset of Dan Campbell, they're going to be aiming to come in there and kind of take care of business with the Commanders. And Obviously, if you're doing multiple entries, guys, Jahmyr Gibbs is a given. But at a 2,700 point differential in their prices, and with FanDuel, where touchdowns are so precious, that's what David Montgomery does. He scores touchdowns as well. And so I like him at 6,100. And then the other running back I would mention is the genie's out of the bottle. I mean, I know we're not sure about Swift coming back yet, but Monangai at 6,500 could be another one. And at home against the Giants, his impressive performance, I think that momentum would carry. I think Chicago, speaking of confidence, will be coming into this game with some momentum going their way. And he actually caught the ball too. A little bit of pass catching skills that were exhibited, albeit against the Bengals. But so he would be another running back I would make mention. We don't have to put him here. I would say definitely Montgomery, and then if we do Monangai, that leaves us with 8,200, a very healthy price for to complete the team with the flex. But I will submit those two guys. What says you?
Yeah, I like those calls quite a bit. I mean, Washington, they lost, what's his name? Frankie Louvu, arguably their best defensive player. He's been suspended for hip drop tackles. Obviously, they lost Jaden Daniels. They lost Luke McCaffrey for the season with a broken collarbone. Terry McLaurin has already been ruled out once again. They were rumored to be shopping Deebo Samuel. They've got some vets that they're kind of stuck with that they probably should have tried to get off. But I'm guessing like the way everything happened, is just they were kind of reeling. They were hoping to, entering week 9. If they beat Seattle, they've got some momentum. Daniels is back. They're feeling pretty good. But this thing is imploding quickly. We've talked about this before. I think a lot of narratives are overblown, but I think Dan Campbell, when he has the opportunity and he has any sort of extra reason, it's something to keep in mind. Washington ended their season last year. And I just think this is a spot where Washington's offense is really going to struggle to move the ball against Detroit. And Detroit is probably going to move the ball really well, and they're not going to be shy about scoring points. So, Montgomery is kind of the cheapest way to access that. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if, he goes in, if he has a 2 or 3 touchdown game just by being, a part of it. It doesn't have to be any sort of crazy volume, and he fits pretty well here. And then that actually does leave a nice, for that last spot, we can fit Kyron Williams in right at 8,200. Him and George Kittle, of course, coming off their bye week last week, I did the NFL Edge right up because they played in the late window. They played the Saints. That game was not going to be close. So he did run the ball 25 times, but he split. Some people are I saw some people kind of being a little scared because he split some work with Blake Corum. They were like alternating drives earlier in the game. But that's just like, they're not going to give a dude 38 carries. So it just is what it is. He smashed the 49ers in this matchup last time. And since then, they've lost Bosa and Fred Warner. So I think that, pairing him with Kittle, getting that little mini correlation is a pretty solid approach here. Of course, he had 20 points last week. And then now you're looking at, that was with no receptions. And I would expect him to have to be involved there. So, it turns out it works out as a pretty clean lineup. The only thing I'll say is, like you mentioned with Monangai, obviously if Swift is back this week, we're recording this Wednesday, so we don't yet know the practice reports. That would somewhat change that approach there. Is there anyone, if Swift were to play and they're splitting or Swift is back, whatever, I do think Monangai will be involved on some level, but it wouldn't be the same play, I guess, if he's looking at a 50% workload as opposed to if Swift is out, he's a smash, I think. So who do you have? Because then you could have Kyren in the flex, and I'm assuming we would know that well before. So we'd have Kyren and Montgomery as our two running backs. So we could go running back or receiver with that 6,500. Is there anyone in there that appeals to you? Or anyone above, and we can try to find some salary.
Yeah, two more shout outs at the flex there. Definitely Kyren Williams is an angle you can go. And I'm glad you actually brought up, because of the way the game went, I think is why Corum was getting so much work. Like if you're watching Red Zone, like I was, and you're seeing like every time they're in the red zone, why is Blake Corum running? Well, the context is what you said. I mean, they're in a game that, they're not facing much resistance, and they're trying to get some work in most likely. So that's a good way to think about it, to know that Kyron's still getting his volume, but it may not look like it on the face of it.
The Saints, I think it's Nick Underhill, the Saints main beat writer. He looked this stat up or posted it after the game or mentioned it somewhere. The Saints their time of possession was just over 16 minutes. And that's like the 13th lowest time of possession for any team in the last 30 years or something. So it's just a matter of Kyren, the Rams just had the ball all game. So obviously at running back, and the Rams aren't dumb, right? They're coming out of their bye. They knew they've got the 49ers this week. They've got Seattle next week. So yeah, they're not going to, they were proactively trying to reduce Kyren's workload to kind of preserve him. And the Saints were just that bad that they still ended up handing it to him 25 times. So yeah, now I'll let you take it away. What do you think for that last spot? We've got 6,500. If Monangai were to not play, if he does play, he's a smash. You just throw him in there.
Yeah, and two more honorable mentions the way we did have it. You could go to Nico Collins in the flex there, and I think historically he has some of his best outings against who are they playing this week? The Jacksonville Jaguars. Also, you could do Rico Dowdle and pair him with the Panthers defense. So a couple of other shout outs if we were to keep it Monangai as the second running back for that flex spot. But obviously Kyren very viable as well. If Kyren's going to be the running back 2, it's funny, the flex spot leaves you with Monangai at 6,500. Ironically, where we'd have to flip it around. Otherwise,
well, yeah, that's why I put Kyren there. You would obviously have Kyren in the flex if Monangai played. You'd have him in the running back spot. But if we find out Swift's going to play, which we'll know that by Friday, then Kyren would be that running back 2. So we'd have a couple options. We could, instead of Kyren, you could go with Dowdle and throw in Jamison Williams and get two of the cheaper pieces of that Detroit game. Otherwise, you could stick with Kyren, and we've got 6,500 to work with from there.
I love that shout. I think Jamison Williams could be in for a big game at Washington too, and you're kind of getting a player block with Montgomery. You're kind of getting the passing and the rushing. I also like if we keep Kyren Williams in there, we can go to another Bear in the flex, and we talked him up. I talked him up actually on Sunday in the FanDuel Final Thoughts. But DJ Moore, if Luther Burden is still out this week, and of course if Swift's not playing, DJ Moore, I think just inherently he'll get more work because they do design rushes for him. And it looks like he kind of busted out of the shell and was utilized.
He throws some passes too.
That's right. He threw the touchdown to Caleb. That was amazing. Didn't see that coming. But yeah, he'd be another candidate, I think, if we kept it with Kyren. Either of those routes I think are all very viable. I'm kind of excited about looking at all those directions with you. So.
Yeah. I like that. And I do think, like we said, we'll leave Monangai in because I think I love how that build looks. I kind of am like Swift. The Bears are looking like they could be a team that contends for the playoffs. I do think that they have a role for Swift. With as well as Monangai played, I know it's against the Bengals, but I do think there's a pretty good chance that this Ben Johnson offense, ironically, he's in our lineup right next to David Montgomery. I think that would make sense for him to kind of be that more of the pounder, grinder type, and allow DeAndre Swift. It's probably better for his longevity too if Swift gets a little bit less of a workload. So I do think he's going to be a part of this offense going forward. And I do think he did so well last week that if you're the Bears and you're thinking long-term, my gut kind of is that Swift will not play again this week. They'll give him one more week off, especially with where the Giants are at. They've got some turmoil going on. There's defensive players throwing things around. It's not pretty in New York right now. So I do think they play the Vikings the following week. I think Swift does sit, so I think Monangai is a smash. Let's just leave him in there.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm definitely I'm fine with that.
All right. So for those of you listening on the podcast feed, our final roster here, we have a Sam Darnold double stack with Jackson Smith-Njigba and Rashid Shaheed, Marvin Harrison bring back, betting on that Seattle-Arizona game, their second matchup this year, this time in Seattle. Last time was in Arizona, but we do not have Kyler Murray weighing this thing down anymore. We've got a very different Arizona offense. And then we have running back David Montgomery betting on the Lions smashing, riding the wave of Kyle Monangai, who, if Swift is out, he is in another elite matchup, top 3 running game matchup against the Giants at home. And then we've got the Carolina Panthers defense against the purposely terrible Saints, and rounding it out with George Kittle at tight end in a mini correlation with Kyron Williams in the flex. That, dare I say, game of the week. I think that's fair to say for this main slate. That would be, I don't think maybe the Bucs Patriots, but to me, that's pretty clearly the top option there. Rams and 49ers. Kind of next couple weeks will be huge for the NFC West.
Yeah, at the very least, it's the Sunday late hammer. I think the Patriots-Bucs games is very interesting, but definitely can be more challenging to play it in DFS, really, especially with the Patriots with their spread-out nature. But no doubt Drake May obviously having a great year.
For sure. So, that'll do it. Like I said, we check us out, oneweekseason.com if you are not already a member. 30% off rest of season for Inner Circle or All Access. I believe the Bink Machine as well, which is our optimizer. We've got the Sims, which have been helping me out. I know we were talking about your stuff. I had a couple pretty solid lineups again. Didn't hit anything huge, but a couple top 20 in large fields. So was kind of in the mix there. Needed Puka to come back for one more catch to get over the 100-yard bonus. Would have been worth it, a couple grand. But I digress. Either way, was pretty locked in for OWS fam last week. Maximus took it home. Zandamir took home the crown on the Yahoo, their main contest. And our users, the Binks channel, was popping. So with that said, I am Mike. He is Max. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you next week for week 11. Bye.
1 week season.